Good evening. Welcome to Investigator News, and I'm your host, Elly, and this is the World War III report with me and William, and we got great news for tonight. And Karen is our moderator, and we thank her very much for being here tonight. Uh, and she says truth in news. That's what we are here. All right. I want to just thank William for being a co-host or a host. He does his own shows on Monday nights. So be sure to subscribe and share us. Uh, the White House threatens to ban African journalists from the press event. There has been a journalist out of Africa that it keeps asking questions, and the press secretary seems to think he's arguing with her. And they're thinking on banning him. I'm surprised they haven't banned Peter Ducey for the same thing, but I think they would get a lot of feedback. But the White House did threaten to ban this African journalist from the press events. Uh, I'm hoping other journalists will stand up that this is um, freedom of speech. And when we look at freedom of speech, it's just really odd because I listened to one of the colleges under freedom of speech. William, this is something because they said you're letting the protesters, that are pro Hamas or pro Palestinian, say how horrible this is that's going on. And one of the press people said, "What if it was Africa? What if it was Black Americans? What if Black Americans were doing things? Would you go against them?" And they got really quiet. They got very quiet, and they wouldn't answer. And they said they started. I call double talking, William. And she said it's a yes or no answer. And she got mad and just blew her off. So it shows that if it's Hamas and it's Palestinians, okay. But if it was African Americans doing this, they don't want to talk about it.
You just got to be part of the in party. You know what I mean? You just got to be with it.
You got to be part of that woke system. Yeah.
That stuff.
Let's see.
We did years ago, it's woke now, but back in the day, it was being ate up. You'd be ate up. So you go in the military, you would want to be part of the military establishment. You would want to be all, brainwashed. And so you would.
What gets me is we spent so much time of trying to accept everyone for who they were, no matter what color. Now we have to look at color. Why?
Well, we actually, for the most part, don't pay attention to color. I mean, functionally.
It seems like only the politicians and
want us to look at them as the primary group, right? And they want to reverse the discrimination they saw from the time of slavery all the way up, until even the 60s, when Martin Luther King came out. So they're not doing Martin Luther King any favors by trying to reinstitute discrimination, just reverse discrimination. So it's not like they're getting rid of discrimination, they're just flipping the coin. They actually want discrimination. So when they said they didn't want discrimination, they did want discrimination. They just wanted their kind of discrimination.
Yeah, and it seems like it's only with politicians and the colleges and the schools. And this is funded by Soros foundations, where they're pouring money into them to cause this rift. Because People like me and you, like me. I don't have a problem. I have a son that adopted son that's African American. I went to my prom with of a black man, and I've got close friends like that. And
I
I've
have,
never
I have,
ever thought of them as a color. I think of them as a friend. And see, that's our generation, and we're looking at this new Generation Z or whatever they are, the woke. And it's in the colleges, it's in the schools, and it's being taught. And now we look at the FBI when the parents are saying, no, we're not going to have this because we were raised differently. um, then the FBI is going to step in and squash them on it, put
I
them on the
feel like
FBI
we're
list. But
trying
I
to
went and
bail out.
looked. William, I went and looked at the FBI on terrorism, and number one is Iran. Number two is um, pretty much all the terrorist group. I didn't see nothing on really parents or Catholics or any of that on their terror watch list. And I was surprised. I was really surprised because I expected to see, the parents first, and then it was going to be the Catholics, and then it was going to be Christians, and the Republicans, because that's what they're saying on the news. Get this there. What gets me is I was listening to um, the news yesterday, and I was going through and listened to all of it on Trump, and it was he's a dictator. Okay, NBC, ABC, he's a dictator. CBS, he's a dictator. MSNBC, he's a dictator. CNN, he's a dictator. Dictator. That's Operation Mockingbird. And they were spewing the same line, the same exact thing they were saying. It was almost like one channel handed the script over to the next channel. How do people watch
Yeah,
that
and then
crap?
they add with the dictator, they add some superlative like, the orange Jesus, and it's all just, it's baloney. What's happened is we're on a ship of state, right? But the ship is capsized. Everything that's up is down now. Everything that's down is now up. We're trying to bail out an ocean with teacups. What we need to do is flip the ship back up so it floats right.
And the other thing is Senate Republicans are going to try to block Schumer's Ukraine funding. Now, they're saying it's a tit for a tat. I watched them argue the other day on, well, you guys did this, and this to us. And now and the Democrats are saying the only reason why you're doing all of this is because we did this, and it's a tit for a tat. And I tell you what, I thought they were going to come to blows. But then we seen um, a classified briefing aimed at making progress on the Biden administration request for increased foreign aid for the wars in Ukraine and Israel achieved the opposite effect. It achieved anything at all. Republican Senators Tom Cotton, Mitt Romney agreed Tuesday that the most heated they've ever seen in the Senate. Usually, senators don't scream at one another in front of the cameras. The Secretary of Defense, really, all of them were yelling at one another. And it's the heated disagreement, Schumer claimed, began with Mitch McConnell started asking questions about border security. And I watched it, and the whole thing is I mentioned it Monday about this new bill that's in the Senate waiting to be voted on, and Schumer's sitting on it. But there's other things he's sitting on, and this is what Nancy Pelosi did, folks. Is if there was bills that the Democrats wanted, she put them through real quick. Those that really had to do with the Republicans and would help our country would collect dust on her desk. And so, I sent some of um, my resources at the Capitol in, and I said, "Is it there? Are those files there getting dust?" And they said, "Yes, yes." And so, what
Well, she
we're
was doing us the favor. She didn't round file.
what?
Just
Well, yeah. Well, they just shuffle them to the bottom. It's, kind of like folks that apply for Social Security disability. If you call them, your file gets pulled to the top, and they put it on the top, and it's usually the next few that get put to the judges. Now, if you don't call them, you stay at the bottom, and you gradually, and you wait and wait and wait, and you collect dust. It's the same way with the Senate and these bills, and Congress. Um, Congress is the same way. If it's the Democrat House rules, then that's what they do. When it's Republican House rules, I bet you they do the same thing. And see, that's what the Democrats are claiming. But they're the ones that played the game first. They're the ones that play that game. So it's almost to the point of blows with Schumer and Schiff, Nadler, with Jordan and Kennedy from Louisiana as another one. And then there's a lady, I can't think of what her name is, but she's fighting them on it too. Yeah, I think you mentioned last night, William, about there is so much going in. No, you mentioned it to me on the phone. So much going in at Congress and for bills right now that
So yeah, it's crazy. What we're seeing in Congress right now is an effect of what started in the 80s. The, the, the country decided we'd gone down the liberal road too far, and there's started to be people starting to resist it, right? We had, like, I don't know, the Ruby Ridges and the other crazy stuff happened. But generally, the population has said, this has gone too far, and so the political movement has started to push back the other way. Well, it's finally picked up steam, and it's getting towards its apex, and so, they're almost coming to blows in Congress. We knew this was going to happen eventually. It had to happen because we had to stop the liberal drift of the country. Now, the people that have been in power for 40 years, right, creating their new world domination thing, they're looking at power starting to slip from their hands. They're having to fight for every last thing they get. They're having to cheat their way through. They're having to lie their way through. They can't just go along to get along anymore. And so, they're frustrated. They're angry because it's not convenient anymore. It's hard.
Yeah. Now, what the big thing that I caught today was Iranian aircraft intrudes on the USS Eisenhower. And the Iranian drone flew over the USS Dwight Eisenhower aircraft carrier strike group last week, and it was operating in the Persian Gulf. But what the Iranians probably didn't know is the drone itself was being closely tracked by a Navy helicopter outfitted with a crew to serve that had a machine gun on board. U.S. Central Command basically took photos from a helicopter showing the Iranian drone flying high above the fleet with machine gun in the foreground. The Iranian unmanned aircraft took an unsafe, unprofessional actions near this aircraft carrier during the course of a routine flight operations in international waters. This, according to Vice Administration, or no, I think it's Admiral Brad Cooper,
yeah,
with the Naval Forces Central Command. They basically, he said, it's unsafe, it's unprofessional, it's irresponsible behavior by Iran, and risks the U.S. and partner nations' lives, and it needs to cease immediately, he said. William, this is the same thing we're seeing through, if it's not Iran, if it's not Houthi, if it's not Hamas or Hezbollah, it's China, it's North Korea. They're all, they put that line, draw a line in the sand, but they've stepped over, and they're saying, now what are you going to do? And I said this the other night, I think last night. And I think that's where we're at with what we're seeing with even this. They're flying close. They were within, I think, 1,500 yards of the Roosevelt aircraft carrier. So it got close.
Oh, the Eisenhower, not Roosevelt.
Oh, yeah. Roosevelt. I'm sorry. Let me make sure.
The Eisenhower, yeah.
Yes, the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. So it was within 1,500 yards, they say. So
we in the Navy, we consider close 12 miles. We're ready to blow things out of the air at 12 miles. When you're getting down to yards, that's if I had been
they did warn them. They did multiple hails and warnings, but Iran ignored them.
I would have let the drone pass over the Ike, and just after it passed over the Ike, I'd have blown it out of the air from above, and they would never known what happened. They just know they were taking pictures, and then they weren't, and the drone's gone.
Yeah.
But that's just me.
So I mean, that's just Iran that's doing it.
Well, they have a right to do it. China does it.
Well, yeah, China's doing it right now over in Taiwan. They're doing the same thing. In fact, I had a report that they had went into international waters and said, "What are you going to do?" And that's why the question I had earlier for you was, will we react? Are we going to react? And what will happen if we react? Because we had Trump saying last night he would blow them out of the water, but he wouldn't have let it get this far.
So he wants to be proactive. This administration would rather let the incursions pile up, meaning they're going to let the whole pot come to a boil, and then they're going to overreact and drive us into a war, rather than nipping it in the bud and have it just go away.
Yeah.
But,
and it causes what they call war fatigue. And I think we're starting to see it for even right now with Ukraine, because nobody's really interested in what's going on in Ukraine, but we're giving them billions of dollars that we have to pay for. And what people don't understand is that raises our federal taxes. That's why the taxes are going up. And people are in America just want to see an end in sight for paying for other countries. War fatigue.
They did a study on people and getting married, and they're going to be married forever. And they're all in agreement. Being married forever is a good thing. The problem is their conception of forever was only out about 15 months.
Yeah. And we've given Ukraine $75 billion in aid. 70.
So they felt good about taking care of Ukraine forever. Now we've reached the end of the forever span of 15 months. War fatigue. Yep.
And as it turns out, our money's also going to the farmers there to purchase seeds and fertilizer. They're financing more than just weapons. We discovered the U.S. government is buying seeds and fertilizers for Ukrainian farmers. And in the meantime, they're squashing our farmers. They've given the farmers over there $57,000.
And we're buying time at the local amphitheaters so that they can have concerts.
Yeah.
The state's paying for all of that.
Yeah. And see, a lot of people really don't know. And they call it war fatigue, though. We're getting tired of paying for Ukraine. And right now, everybody's like, help Israel, help the Palestinians, on the other side.
Well,
or help Taiwan.
The truth is we don't really have war fatigue. What we have is administration fatigue that's damping down our economy. If our economy is doing good, we wouldn't care if the money was going out the door, because we'd be doing good in the economy. If you don't take care of the economy, everything else follows from that. And if you don't give cheap energy to the economy, the country to run the economy, everything follows from that. Well, they want to turn that off over some amorphous carbon molecules high in the atmosphere that, everybody knows ash falls out of the sky, right? Carbon doesn't stay up there. But yet it's going to cause, endless warming and cooling and back and forth and up and downs.
And then, I think even the Pentagon is getting war fatigue. Iranian-backed Houthi rebels fired missiles and drones at 3 commercial vessels. We've heard about that at the Red Sea from their bases in Yemen. And the USS Carney fired back, knocking 3 drones out of the sky. However, the threat to the free navigation of shipping in international waters is growing. But this president really isn't doing too much, according to the Pentagon. If our ships see something is coming near them or toward them, they're going to assess the threat and shoot it down, according to the Department of Defense. And people are thinking this is because of Israel. Well, no, because the Houthi has been shooting at our ships or even blocking ships for quite a few years. The thing is now the Pentagon officials think this is a tepid response, that there should be harsher actions over the last couple of years so that it wouldn't keep happening. William, I have to agree with the Pentagon that, when the Carl Vinson was down there around the Red Sea, a friend of my son was on one of the ships. It wasn't the one that I think they blocked him, but it wasn't the one they fired on. But this was about 3 years ago, and they keep doing it and doing it and doing it down there. If it's not Yemen, it's Libya. If it's not either of them, it's Oman.
So these countries, they recognize over time what our rules of engagement are. So the rules of engagement come down from the presidency, the civilian part of the government, to the military. The military doesn't engage in war on its own. It has to be directed by the civilian government. So once that happens, rules of engagement are discussed between that, the military and the president. President finally comes up with what he believes is the right thing to do. That's handed down. So apparently our rules of engagement are, under no circumstances do we fire on anything other than the self-defense against missile attacks, mortars, what have you. But we're only going to fire back if the president authorizes it. When this president's not authorizing it.
And
you have to act within those laws.
Yeah.
Otherwise, complete chaos would ensue.
Yeah. And we have had problems with Libya and Yemen and Oman for over a decade, because if you remember, in Libya we had with the ambassador over there, and they attacked. They have been doing this.
Benghazi.
Benghazi, yes.
In Benghazi, yeah.
Yeah, so Benghazi happened, and it seems to continue, even up to the point, we had Somalia with Black Hawk Down, and we responded swift and quick. We got in there and we did what had to be done. And that is a strong America right there.
This always happens under Democratic administrations.
Yes,
they
are.
They want anger.
The Democrats want a one world order. They want all of us to be the same. They want all races all over the world in every country. But at the same time, they want to eliminate a couple million people. And I think this is why the wars are starting, is that they're trying to depopulate. And we'll get further with later on. And even Ukraine President Zelensky. Now, he's been begging, going around begging everybody for money. And Italy has already said they're done with China and the Belt and Road because nothing's going on. It's a fake. And then now Ukraine with Zelensky, um, he's now suddenly canceled his meetings with Congress and U.S. lawmakers, and it remains divided over providing further funding and support.
So we provided for them basically 2 years of sustenance,
Yeah.
everything they need. And the second,
and I just got through saying we're funding farmers over there with it.
Yeah, sure.
Um,
It's what happens. War, it destroys economies, and everybody has to be subsidized.
Now, me and you talked about this, and we went in depth with this one. Israel won mankind's first ever space battle by destroying Houthi missiles outside the atmosphere. Israel deployed its Arrow-Long air defense missile for the first time last month, shooting down ballistic missiles in outer space, which is called the first space battle. Now, you said, oh, because now there's space space junk basically up there.
Well, so missiles don't go high out into space. They're low Earth orbit. They just go out of the atmosphere, graze along the atmosphere, and then arc back down into the atmosphere and make their strike. So that's what ballistic means. You go up just out of the atmosphere, and then you drop back down.
But it's basically this is our first space war.
Yeah.
Wow.
That jump would be moving at speeds exceeding at 17,000 miles an hour. You can escape Earth's gravity and create a satellite out of whatever you send up. But ballistic missiles don't travel at quite that speed, so it would be a little bit lower. And because they're not traveling at escape velocity, that junk would fall out fairly quickly, I've learned.
And
so that's what that is.
Really a small update on Israel is one of the largest weapon depots in the Gaza Strip was found near a hospital and school in northern Gaza Strip by the 50th Battalion and the 460th Brigade. The depot contained hundreds of RPG missiles, launchers, and of various types, dozens of anti-tank missiles, dozens of explosives, long-range missiles aimed at central Israel, dozens and dozens and dozens, they say, of grenades and UAVs. The weapons were seized by the soldiers. Some were destroyed on site, and some were sent for further investigation. All of the terrorist infrastructure was found close to civilian buildings like hospitals and schools, and it was in the heart of civilian population. This is additional proof of Hamas' cynical use of residents of the Gaza Strip as human shields. They've done this for folks. I want to tell you, terrorists, it doesn't matter who they are, whether it's Hamas or Hezbollah or ISIS or Al Qaeda or Houthi or any of them. They always put stuff right near the hospitals and the schools. They do underground bunkers out right underneath because they know most countries, most armies will not fire upon a hospital. What?
Just Western countries. Because we've gone to the Geneva Conventions. There's Eastern countries that they'll do the same thing. So there's two schools of thought. One is a humanitarian school of thought that if you fire on those institutions, you'll create unnecessary deaths of civilians. too much collateral damage. Well, the other part of the argument is, well, we're weak because we won't fire on civilians to get at their military. And so they're just using us against ourselves. They don't see the fact that these are civilians that could die at any moment, right? That doesn't really cross their minds. What they do see is, well, this enemy is reticent to attack these areas because they don't want on their conscience some sort of problem with death. Well, that doesn't exist in Islam. It's a culture of death, all right? And so they revere death. It's important to be a martyr to Islam, not just go through your life meaninglessly. So they're doing their own people actually a favor in their minds by putting these weapons caches right below hospitals. But here's the real dirty little secret. They're not just putting weapons caches there. They're manufacturing them there.
Yes. They're storing them there. Yeah. And storing them there.
The hospital.
Yeah. And, you know, they did that one hospital that the bomb or missile, whatever it was, that hit right next to the hospital. Underneath, they found almost a city. It was an underground bunker that had been well established for many years. And it was under the hospital. And, you know, during the Syrian war, we seen that a lot too. And they would blow up their own hospitals just to hide what they've done, because that's what they did in Syria. They blew up the hospital. And nobody knew why. And then they went back and blew it up again while it was empty and already blown up. They blew that hospital up 3 times. And nobody ever knew why. But Syrian girl, what she told me, it was that all their stuff was underground. And what they were trying to do is get it to collapse so they could hide what ISIS had under the hospitals. Wow. You know, that just shows their military idea or ideals.
Well, war is by its nature hell on earth. Okay, that's what it's designed to be. Regardless of who you are, you want to get at the other combatants and stop them from doing what they're doing. It's the end of political policy. It's the absolute end of that road. So that's what's going to happen is if they see what we do as weak, they're going to counter by using that against us. We had the same problems, you know, in Vietnam. People just absolutely could not understand and react to the fact that they would take their very own children, right, in a cradle, in a carriage, filled full of explosives, and leave it beside a group of military men while the parents stepped away. It just didn't register in their heads that a group of people are willing to destroy their own children to get at you.
Yeah, but see, that's the whole thing. They don't follow the I can't say there's rules of war, but you know, there's the Geneva Convention. There's certain things you just cannot do. But now that's for countries, but terrorists, they don't have to abide by none of that. They can do whatever they want. They can, like you said, put babies in carriages like that. They don't.
This is proof positive that just because we feel something and we think something, that other people do the same way. It's just not the fact.
That's right.
People think how they think, not how we think.
Yeah. Well, on a lighter note, William, I giggled on this one because now let's move over to North Korea and Kim Jong-un. Well, oh boy, he was in tears. He was crying. They couldn't even hardly get him to stop. And this was at the National Conference of Mothers. I don't know why he was there. Well, the thing is, he's urging women across the country to help with stopping the declining birth rate and reminding mothers of their government requirement to become a communist and to have lots of children. He first of all, the mothers themselves should become communist mothers who have a noble and beautiful moral qualities, Kim said. Unless a mother becomes communist, it's impossible for her to bring up her sons and daughters as communists and transform the members of her family unto revolutionaries. I need more babies. William, I know what I told you, but I can't tell my viewers what I thought he should do.
As it turns out, there's a way to make that happen. He's just not willing to go that far.
More babies. And he was
right.
crying.
I mean,
he was boo-hooing and oh my gosh, you got to have babies. Is that Kim Jong-un's weakness? No kids?
Well, we all got to, in order to have babies, everybody's got to drink the same water. You know that, right?
Yeah. Well, I kind of like the thought I had, but I'm not going to go there. Now, Islamic State takes the credit for that deadly bombing of Christians in the Philippines. They had that big bombing over there, and it hurt quite a few. So the Islamic State is taking that, taking responsibilities for that.
So these are all civilians. They don't affect in any way whether the Islamic State is more or less powerful. All it does is create a photo op for the Western press. It's just for propaganda. They're killing people for propaganda. Cold. Very cold.
Yeah. Now, Putin makes a rare trip outside Russia for OPEC talks with Saudi Arabia. Now, this is just the whole thing with the oil for the production of become
the Organization of Petroleum.
They want to control it and be number one, where we had it a few years ago. I think they're.
It's called price fixing. This is an organization that gets involved in price fixing so that their oil is maximized in its value over time, because you only get so much oil, right? Once it's used up, it's used up. So you want to get as much out of it as far as monetarily being reimbursed back to the country as you can get. So the best way to do that is get together and just price fix.
Yeah.
Drive up the price.
Now, there is a new AI-powered drone. It's both a bomb and a boomerang, is what it's saying. Me and William talked about this. Now, this comes from the Los Angeles Times. What if a missile could jet towards a moving target, then fly back home and try it again if it missed? That's what's behind the idea of the Roadrunner. If it's a novel combination of an AI-powered drone, bomb, boomerang, designed by the defense tech company Anduril, and it was announced last Thursday. So everybody is scrambled to see what this thing looks like. Now, I'm going to kind of remove William for a sec. And
oh no, I'm melting.
Let me get this thing. Oops. It's about a minute long. But you'll see this thing. It's pretty a pretty neat little drone. You know me, I'll show this stuff. Let's see, I'm gonna put me little, and here we go, folks. Here is the new boomerang. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Because that's one of our new ones. And of course, I'm gonna show all the new stuff that
The boomerang and the triangle are the most efficient airfoils ever created. People don't realize that Aboriginals in Australia had created the ultimate in lift bodies, and it would return to them, and it used the least amount of material. And we've been able to take that in the military and use that as a lifting body and carry not just a weapon over there, but a mind, a computer neural network, so it could decide whether or not it was worth bombing at that point and disarm the thing and fly back home to be used again if that's necessary. And people don't realize really that wars are won by doing more with less. Yeah. And anytime you don't have to waste a weapon, you save a great deal of money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now you had something on the Africa. Was it Africa?
Oh yeah. So I talked about that there were 50 people killed in Africa. Oh great! As I say it, this thing drops off my screen. Here we go. All right, I'm back. So the 50 civilians were killed in an attack in Ethiopia, and it had been denounced by a human rights commission called the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission. Surprise. On Wednesday, that was about 2 weeks ago, right? After negotiations between the government and a local liberation army called the Oromo Liberation Army ended without an agreement. So what happened is the Oromo engaged in a firefight near this place called, let me try to find it, it's called Ben Ish Angul Gumo Gumens, right? Gum So Ethiopia is French, and what I'm reading right now is actually written kind of backwards, because that's what the French do, is they kind of write opposite the direction we do. They start out with the vowels and then work back to the consonants, and then change the consonants back into vowels as well. So anyway, this Liberation Front had been involved in clashes with the federal government in Ethiopia since 2018. But they had only got involved with fighting other fighters, okay, so 7 people. But now there's a splinter group, apparently, that had broken off from the Oromo Liberation Front, and they attacked these other civilians. So they attacked 30 other civilians, and according to this article, among the civilians were babies, pregnant women, even adults as old as 80 years old. But they can't figure out who exactly had done it, because they didn't leave anybody to talk about who came, right? They wiped them right out, the entire family, for the homes that they went into. And so they know that it's a terrorist, splinter group off from a terrorist organization, but they don't know which one. And so these people lost their lives, and the federal government of Ethiopia can't decide who these people are. Now, the area they come from in Ethiopia is in the southern region. It's the southern third of the country. So if you just break the country into thirds from north to south, the southern third is where they come from. And in that area, there's 40 million people. So you can imagine trying to figure out who in this 40 million people that dress like civilians, that are actually combatants, that broke off from another combatant organization, has happened. Now, as it turns out, most of these people were Christians, and this terrorist organization happens to be Islamic. Well, that's kind of a surprise. But I think what has happened here, and there's no way I can prove this, but this is an opinion by me, is the original terrorist organization were only going after other combatants of the federal government. But this splinter group decided, you know what, that's not being profitable enough,
Mm-hmm.
not for Islam, and so they've gone ahead, and as the terrorist organization, the main terrorist organization, had made their fight with other federal forces, right? While they were doing that, they slipped around behind the federal forces and the terrorist organization, and they went in and slaughtered these people. So they piggybacked on top of this, and so it's really confusing right now. And this civilian, let me come back up here, this Ethiopian Human Rights Commission has been working very hard to try to suss out what has been happening here, because everybody has bits and pieces on this thing, but nobody has really been able to understand the whole picture. All they do know is there was a firefight involving 17 people that they know was between the federal government, and they know it was, you know, a typical armed conflict over the power of a region, over the power of the state. So that's just war. That's okay. But this other thing, that's an aberration. Now, the terrorist organization, the OLA, is run by Addis Ababa. It's basically a Muslim splinter organization, and they want to have more power in Ethiopia. Now, you got to keep in mind, Ethiopia is next to Sudan. Sudan is lawless, right? And so these people are able to get weapons. They're able to buy things on the black market through Sudan and be able to operate their liberation army, they call it. And the splinter group, they're not calling it Liberation Army, they're calling it the Oromo Liberation Front, which is a splinter group of the Liberation Army. And so, yeah, it's just basically people having the opportunity to kill because others are doing it. And gee, 9 members just happen to be, you know, part of the Lutheran Church diocese there, and it all worked out in the end, right? Not really. That's just being sarcastic. But it's too bad that 50 people had to die here.
That happens really a lot. I've got them friends in Kenya, and one over in it's on the western part. I can't think of the name of it. And
imagine a poor area in Africa, and millions are coming in foreign aid from places like the United States. Wouldn't you want a piece of that pie if you had guns?
That's it.
And people able to be generals? So that's actually what's happened. They're fighting over things like federal aid, over being able to own the property that mines are on, whatever's lucrative, right?
Yeah, well, it's whatever others have and they can take. And my friend over there that has a school, many times he has said that, you know, they want the seeds, they want the, you know, they'll do a garden, and once it produces, they just swoop in and they take it. Yeah. And not only that, but over the last few years,
grow the garden all year long, and they'll just swoop in, you know, for the harvest.
Yeah. And the other thing is, boy, about, I'm going to say at least 10 years ago, when he went over there and started the school, he was able to, you know, drive around or move around. But now you have to have an army escort you places because it's no longer safe. And that's parts of Kenya that should be safe.
Yeah, and so what they have to do is they have to hire mercenaries, mercs,
yeah,
to provide them extra security, more than just security over an angry civilian population, but over an armed organization. So they have to have fighters in front of them, behind them, and being watched to all sides. So it's an expensive deal once you have to have security that's capable of fighting small arms insurrection.
And one of the last things I want to bring up for a big discussion is now during the Reagan years, one of the big things that the Democrats and independents had issues with was his cognitive issues and what they call the football. That's the case. It's carried with the button. They said, what if he gets confused? Remember, because there was even a video made. MTV showed it. And they made fun of Reagan over his cognitive and that he wouldn't be able to run our country. But not only that, but would he push the button? Now, a lot of people really don't know what this football is. Now, is the current president, if they were so concerned about Reagan, is this current president, should he be responsible for this football? And William's going to tell you about this when I'm talking about football. Or my question was, maybe the Pentagon and maybe a top general should be in charge of this over him, because of making decisions with us so close to war with China. Now, William, go ahead and I know me and you discussed this, and I was very intrigued on what you had to say about this case. So go ahead.
So we have to talk about the people that this case controls first, and then we'll go back to the case, and it'll make more sense. So our people in our Global Strike Command, that's the strategic part of the Air Force that does nuclear bombing, nuclear missiles, and the Navy has the same thing with their ballistic missile submarines, and there's some launch capability on all ships, really. So they're constantly drilled, just as if they're going to war. So they don't know if they're actually going to war. They've been drilled to throw the buttons, turn the keys, the whole thing, start it. The thing's been short-circuited, right? So even though the klaxons go off, the lights start spinning, the telephones start ringing, they don't know. So every day they have to be capable of basically ending humanity in their own families. So that's just a terrific, puts people psychologically under terrific duress. Now, what they did was they came up with a program to make it so that not just anybody in that chain could set it off. And what they used is codes and keys. All right. So even if the order was given by Biden to start a nuclear strike, he has to have the codes and keys capable of authenticating the orders, because if you're down somewhere down the stream of the chain of command, you don't know if it's just somebody above you playing games with the world, they've lost their mind, whatever. So you need to know it actually came from the president. Now, the football is held by an individual from the U.S. Marine Corps. And the Marine Corps is a special fighting unit that has all the constituent parts of all the other forces of the United States. It's just a smaller total military. They've got their own little Air Force, they've got their own ships, they've got their own assault vehicles, they have their own armor, and they're the one group in the country that can be sent anywhere, anytime, just on presidential orders. So this group is carrying the authentication codes, all right, so that the people in Global Strike Command and the U.S. Navy strategic forces will go ahead and do their launch. Now, they go through a Top Gun type program, just like our fighter works, that it's authenticated. Two people both having sidearms, right? So if the one refuses to turn the key and push the button, their job is to shoot them and do it for them. So this is, on so many levels, this is checkmated. But now let's look at the presidency. Is it checkmated at the presidency? Well, it turns out the commander-in-chief is the absolute commander-in-chief of the United States. It turns out he is the central figure. He's the warlord of the United States.
Yes.
In this instance, he acts as a global warlord that has the capacity of extincting the human race. All right. Now, in these codes and whatnot, there is a process that is set up by where multiple authentications have to happen. They have to be opened in such a way that they have been tampered with. So these authentications are kept in tamper-proof mediums that have to be actually shattered, broken, open. And then after all this stuff happens, the presidential orders have to go all the way down the chain of command, and the chain of command needs to get the codes showing that it was authenticated all the way up the chain of command to the president. So no one person can start off a nuclear war. Now this happens in every country that has nuclear weapons. Once you have a nuclear weapon, you have to produce a control mechanism that both that's credible, that you can shoot the missiles, but is also credible enough to hold those weapons back so you don't accidentally extinct your country. So this is really dancing on the head of a pin. Now, the guy that hands over that authentication code, so the president gave the order, however he gave it, prepare, and here comes the authentication codes. Is that ring going to give him the right authentication code? Is the president having enough cognitive difficulty? Would he recognize the fact that he had been given a wrong authentication code? So this brings our entire leg of our entire triad under question of other nations. By having a president that could be effectively fooled, just like you do the pea under 3 cups and you spin them around, right? Where's the pea? Well, somebody could actually do that on these authentication codes. And if they believe him not to be able to rationally understand the consequences of those actions, could you morally and ethically, under the Constitution, allow that to be fulfilled? There's so many questions here. It's unbelievable. It's
mind-boggling.
But yeah, so
if you think about it, because this is the same concern they had with Reagan towards the end, and they kept pushing and pushing and keeping him, and he just got worse and worse and worse. And they always had that big concern. And now we have this our current president, and we're looking at him getting worse, and pretty much other politicians from his party and the media ignoring this. And so I've got the kids broke in. So
it's quite a quandary. It brings things into question. You got to remember that our president's a warlord, Putin's a warlord, Xi is a warlord, Un is a warlord, and the Ayatollah is about to be a warlord. On the world stage, warlord type.
So William, do you have anything else for tonight?
Yeah. So we have a doctor that cares for our presidents. We call him the Surgeon General. Most of them come out of the military. They understand the implications of cognitive capacity. We go through all these tests continuously on our pilots because you don't want a pilot going rogue on you. Just one day deciding to take a joyride with some bombs and have some fun, right? Well, this would be the same thing on just a hideously greater level.
Yeah.
So has the Surgeon General said, yeah, we can let him be the President of the United States, but we can't allow him. He doesn't have the cognitive capacity to deal with those questions. We're going to get together as a cabinet and with, our leading politicians, and we're going to come up with an individual that would make that decision. Not any of the other decisions of government, but just that decision. That seems like what's likely happened.
Yeah. And he's not talking. Former ones have.
You don't want to talk about what's going on there because you give the enemy advanced information.
Yeah.
So it has to be quiet, but at the same time, it scares the rest of us.
Yeah, but I mean, we've had former presidents where the doctors came out and said, oh, they're in a good bill of health and they're ready they could be president, except for this one. It's the only one in history that has not came out and said he's in good health and he's doing fine.
Luckily, our government is a representative form of government. I mean, they get their power from the people. Ultimately, they're responsible to the people, whether they like it or not, because they'll just be pushed out of office by somebody else.
Yeah, it's like during the Clinton administration. He brought the Surgeon General from here and took her to Washington with him, and she pretty much kept her mouth shut. We didn't learn about the Clintons' cocaine and heroin problem until the emergency room doctor here came out and spoke about it, but it was after their presidency. And see, I believe, William, that when Biden does leave office, we're going to really hear how bad he really was, because that's when we find out everything. And I think they don't say anything because it would probably scare the hell out of us and anger us.
And at 9/11, the president wasn't in the loop. The vice president wasn't in the loop.
Yeah.
The chief of staff, Dick Cheney, was in the loop. He actually had control of the military.
Yeah.
Dick Cheney. Can you believe that?
Or, even Benghazi.
Someplace in this government, there's a Dick Cheney. There's just no doubt about it.
Yeah. I call him Obama. So, is that it, William?
Yeah, it's kind of what we got going on. We know that there's the war going on here.
And of course, we'll have more tomorrow. Another big news for tomorrow.
And then we've got the war perhaps going to spin down in Ukraine, because it's not that they don't have the warfighting capacity as far as weapons, is they're just running out of material in the form of blood, right? Human beings. They're burning up their civilian
They need
population.
15,000 for Army, I think is what I heard earlier. I think that was on WION, that they need 15,000 men. That's what they're lacking, and funding. But boy,
so you got to pay the fighters.
Yeah.
You've got to supply the weapons, and all the people in the civilian population also have to be sustained with a wrecked economy. So the United States has basically been totally funding Ukraine, except for the relatively smaller donations. Although these smaller countries,
from NATO,
it's a big donation to them, right? Because they don't have as much wherewithal the United States has.
Yeah.
We have more wherewithal not because we're superior in government anyway. It's just
Other
our
countries
form of
don't have
economy
the
is
funding.
more competitive. So
William, we've always picked up the slack for all the other countries.
we've always had to, because
yes,
our form of government has created an economy that is the actual dynamo and powerhouse of the world. All of these other countries, if they hadn't been able to tax the United States, whether it's through interest rates from banks or foreign aid, or we give them discounts on weapons that should cost them 3 times as much. We cut these countries all kinds of breaks because we want to keep what created our society, our civilization, from crumbling into non-existence, right?
yeah,
So we're buying basically countries and using them as museums for the United States. And our tourists go over there, and then they spend even more money. And when things like Ukraine happen, they have to have money for all their wherewithal, and so we send money to Ukraine. They spend it in Europe. They don't spend it in the United States. You got to ship it farther, right? It takes longer to get there. It's just easier to spend it in Europe. So we're not just doing this for Ukraine. We support all these countries that are like these. They're monarchies, right? But they have parliaments, so they're parliamentary monarchies. They're the divine right of leadership of a socialist country. That's what it boils down to. Unless you go to communism, then that's a different monster, because then the government actually takes control of the inside functioning of the church and every business as well. So there's no independence within businesses. So we don't want it to get to this communism point. We're willing to say, okay, we're just going to have to look the other way, because the what could happen is literally extinction of the planet. When we talked about with the football, right? Mm-hmm. And there's not a country out in the world that doesn't say that they love us when we're sending them money and we're helping them survive in a situation they wouldn't survive.
Most of them hate the United States and its people.
But it causes resentment.
Yeah,
it does. Resentment because their governments and economies can't function with the efficiency of the U.S. government.
Linda said, Linda from Illinois, I believe, how about us funding them through the Sharia banks? That ain't going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think Islam's going to give up a little money.
Muslims not. No,
Islam hasn't been.
They haven't shared forever.
Yeah. So. Well, Islam hasn't been terrifically able to produce everything it needs, even with the oil revenues and everything else. Yeah. The vast majority of Arabs have a difficulty living, right?
Yeah.
Just the basic things. And the one way they get past that, they try to survive, is they have a tax. But the tax doesn't go to the government, because then the people did not see anything. Yeah. It goes to their church, it goes to the imams, it goes to the mosque, and then as is needed, that money then goes to the poor, right?
Yeah.
And the functioning of the church. So it's a roundabout tax on the people, but it's been there for ages. When Islam came into being, it was originally taught by road thieves, right? Highwaymen. And Islam came to the world literally on the back of camel. Okay, where camels went, Islam ended up. It just happens to be the case. So, other religions came into ideologies that burgeoned when they were in their infancy. And the same things happened with Catholicism and Christianity here in the United States. And, you know, originally when the people came to the United States, the Christian religions were used as an arm of the European government. Kings and queens had to bow to the Pope. They had to kiss the ring. If they didn't, the other nations in Europe would go to war with them. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So this has always happened. This is how it works. Islam was one of the original groups that engaged in piracy and slave trading. All right, that's how they made their meat.
Muslims, yeah.
Potatoes and got their butter. It was you steal it or you take captives and you sell them to the highest bidder someplace else in the world. So it just
and Muslims believe
now,
in slavery. We and you talked about that earlier. The Muslims do believe in slavery.
You know, we weren't any better when we began. All right, we all start at the same point, but through the teachings of not death and revenge, but of redemption, right? And a second chance is warranted for other people because people can change over time. They learn. Our civilization has been wildly successful.
Yeah.
Wildly successful compared to the other countries on earth. And everybody else, because of how successful Europe had been, right, compared to these Dark Age countries. And then the United States came into being, and that was put on steroids and afterburners.
Yeah.
So we whether we want to believe it or not, doesn't matter which job we do, we feed the world. We feed them either cash, resources, or food, or arms. We really feed the world. And we ought to be proud of that because these people are not just Anglo-Saxon white, right? 50% of the world is women, more than 50%. There's a great deal percentage of the population that are children. So we benefit them. And of these groups, of different ethnicities, we don't look at one group above another when it comes to foreign aid. We look at it as a way to keep the peace in the area and be able to stabilize the world. You know, if you don't stabilize the world, you get what you're seeing with Hamas. You get what you saw with Russia. People become adventurous. These warlords, they're warlords. They know they're warlords. They can make wild sums of money for their country if they can get into a war and get out of a war quickly. Right? That's the be-all, end-all of warfare, is to get it done as fast as possible so you're not wasting your national stock. So, like your treasure. So wars are fought with both treasure, money, right, and weapons. That's how you get your weapons, is money, or blood, or both. Most wars are both. Here in the United States, we have certain sensitivities. If we can, at all possible, we don't like to waste the blood of our sons and daughters. And so we go out of our way to create an economy that allows the government to spend a lot on our military aid. And it served us well. It got the world out of World War II, right? And it stabilized the Middle East. And then it stabilized the East. And the reason that happened was because of the economy. And we had to fight those people, right? They didn't just give it to us. We had to go to war. It was either we go to war with them or they will extinct us. There wasn't a choice there. But when the wars spun down and were over, we had the bulk of the manufacturing capacity and of the residual weapons because we had to produce more, just more than aggregate, more and more and more. and we became the de facto superpower of the world, even though we didn't want to go to war and were pacifists. You know, Henry Ford would make a product that went for an offensive weapon, even though Ford trucks hauled most of the supplies of the world. He produced those for farmers, and then farmers would sell them to the military, the Ford trucks. And so just because you want something doesn't mean that's necessarily what you're going to get. I have a story on cheese that is just hilarious. We'll talk about it another time, of unintended consequences. And we've discussed this in the past. Whenever you enter into a war, the war then controls the nation. The war controls the leaders. It's not the other way around. It's a false belief that every politician, for whatever reason, believes that they can enter into an enterprise that they simply will never understand.
Yeah.
And it's not their fault. Most of them are lawyers. They're well educated.
Politicians.
They're part of our intelligentsia. They get good, competent information and explain to them in really a matter of detail that is just almost overbearing to try to understand. You know, presidents that are about to be presidents are briefed by the previous administration.
Yes.
And we see candidates time after time after time, doesn't matter which party they go into, they walk into that thing and there's ramrod straight, and you know, you can tell the blood's pumping through their veins, they're flush, they're ready to tackle the world. And after that briefing, they come out, they're old men. And it happens to everyone. The load that's on a president is unbelievable. So, yes, the administration understands, and all the other parts of the government understand that they have to take what this president says with a grain of salt. And that things have to be verified. They have to go through their scenarios, their beliefs, whether or not, if they enter into an intervention that might lead to an exchange of these weapons, that all the competent people in the room have a voice, and that only those voices that are competent, basically through a group,
presidential advisors. That's what they're called.
The president doesn't have the capacity actually to control. Everything needs to be controlled to save those weapons and to make them both effective and be able to control them in such a way that they're an actual deterrence and not a lead to the ultimate destruction of the world. It's when you get into the business of war on the scale the United States got pushed into, basically because all these other countries started civil wars they couldn't get themselves out of, extricate themselves from. For the last 130 years, if you're someplace in the world, 130 years ago, the people who came before you 130 years ago were 5 times more poor. The United States has been able, through its wild wealth, it doesn't make its way to all the people in the United States, obviously, but the wealth is so great in comparison to what the rest of the world has, is that the U.S. economy, even though we haven't went out to these countries of the world, we've just tried to stabilize them so we don't have to fight another war there. and end up in a situation where another superpower comes into the fact. And so we try to stomp these fires out before they can become a firestorm. We control it when it's small so that it doesn't control you later. And it's a necessary evil. So these dollars have been used for this all over the world. And they have lifted up the entire world, especially in the last 70 years since the dropping of the bomb. We've been terribly lucky. What would the world look like if the United States didn't exist and the Soviet Union had taken over the rest of the world? What would it look like? Now, what would China look like in that situation? Now, China got most of its money from the United States. The investment came from the United States. The intellectual property, for the most part, came from the United States. We have been the best friend of the communist people, and the communist people, or the Chinese people in aggregate, have liked the idea of how communism works more than going it alone into this dark world and just be given equal opportunity. Means you have the opportunity to fail like everybody else, but if you want to go forward, you're going to have to come up with an idea, a product, or sell somebody else's product and help the barter system to move your country forward. It's been a real boon to the rest of the world what the United States has been able to do. And if you look throughout the world, most of the world are single race nations. Now there's some that have refugees of greater numbers, up to 25% of the population in Europe. The United States has nearly a 50% population of people that weren't part of the original Mayflower Pact that started the nation in the first place. That are not the same religion. I mean, they're Christians, but they're a form of Catholicism. So we've harbored the religion that caused us to run from Europe and to race out into the unknown, and just happened to find this country when we were trying to go to the Far East by a shorter route. So, we're reluctant and not planned for superpower because we had all that military wherewithal, and our scientists came up with a special bomb. And since that bomb came out, it changed all the calculus of wars in history. Millions upon millions, I would say probably 1 billion people's lives have been saved worldwide in the last 70 years because of a weapon dropped on 2 cities. So entire continents of people have been saved because of the military ordnance that were dropped on 2 cities. And it's obvious that even Japan has benefited. They have become a world manufacturing powerhouse. They before World War II, they were basically a cottage industry driven nation with some heavy arms manufacturing capacity.
And Pearl Harbor Day's tomorrow.
December 7th changed history. If December 7th hadn't happened, the trajectory of the United States and this planet, we would, even in the United States, we'd probably be part of a managed slave. The United States would be more like a managed slave colony to other groups that had made it through the war, had more armaments and whatnot, because we were basically just farmers, right, when the war started. And when the war ended, we became the de facto superpower. We we invited in the League of Nations, become the United Nations in New York, and we have come up with rules, right? And these rules have been nominated by the vast majority of the countries of the world, by both population, land size, the whole thing. And because we had given up so much treasure during World War II, we now get to be responsible for all the freedom of navigation by air and by ground worldwide that's in international waters. You just, when a war starts, you don't know how it's going to end.
That's it.
Seriously, we went to Europe to try to help save our history, so we wouldn't have lost all of our cathedrals, we wouldn't have lost the great libraries, we wouldn't have lost the great arts. All of that was there. The greatest schools, the greatest minds up until World War II. It wasn't the United States, it was Germany, right? Germany had the best universities. I believe Oxford and the English were second, and then the third best possibly was the United States, but not likely. And we've been forced to the top by circumstances. So we had presidents who were able to adapt because they only got to stay in power, and we had a peaceful transfer of power rather than a revolution every time there's a new president and, you know, blood being spilled. So we've had peaceful transfers of power. If the Republicans win next time, there will still be a peaceful transfer of power back to the Democrats as soon as they win, and vice versa, right? It goes both ways. We're in pretty good hands as far as civilizational control of our nation. Now, granted, we're a happenstance nation, but it's controlled by the people in the happenstance movements, you know, the new technologies, you know, it could be from the old time of iron, steam, rail, flight, now computers, medicine. All this stuff has happened within a lifetime. The things you take for granted didn't exist for your grandparents when they were born.
That's right.
So I was held as a child, right, in '62. So I was just a baby. My great-grandfather would walk down the street and hold me every day until he passed. That man was born in 1862, and when he was born, fastest a man could go was on a quarter horse. There was nothing faster on the planet. Yeah. And by the time he died, he just missed seeing an astronaut on the moon by 7 years. That's incredible. That's one lifetime.
Yeah.
We went from plowing behind a horse to putting a man on the moon.
Yep.
That happened because of the type of government we have, and the rest of the world has been forced to catch up, and they're resentful. And if you had the shoe on the other foot, right, and you looked at what's happening in the United States, you'd be resentful too, because you'd believe your government would be more successful, even though empirically we know that's not the case. But where you're born, that's where you love. The geography is where you are, is what creates you as a people and you as a culture. And you don't want to lose that flavor. You don't want to have that taken away. You don't want your memories stripped from you. And so you love that area. And so we've had to protect people that basically would like us out of the way so that they would be able to, what they believe, protect themselves. But the important part here is, if for whatever reason Doesn't matter what the reason is. For whatever reason, the United States ever fails, and we lose our form of government and our economy, okay, every other sort of free country will be gone.
Mm-hmm.
History will change once again.
That's
we'll
right.
slide back into a dark age, and all these people we've lifted up, and since the United States, not only we lifted the economy, but we've made it possible for their birth rates to go up. They have bigger families. They've had bigger reunions. There's more of them. The best thing that's happened to the world in the last 2,000 years after Christ is our form of government, and then what's happened in this lifetime in our country.
Mm-hmm.
We're incredibly blessed.
That's
it's
right.
a struggle. It's frustrating, but that's why Elly and I try to get this information out to you so you can protect the thing that gains you the absolute most in the ability to sustain yourself and your families, and as a byproduct, we give the world actually to the world, not allowing it to just be a cratered battlefield.
Yeah.
So that's that.
That's it. Yeah, William. We just want to tell everybody we're the truth in news, and subscribe to us and like us. Do the thumbs up. The thumbs up and the likes tells YouTube we need to be seen more on your list, as well as ringing our bell. We got a new ending tonight. So with that, you guys have a wonderful Wednesday, and God bless, and stay safe, stay warm. And me and William, thanks a lot. He had a lot of great info. A lot of the info he told me today when we discussed it before the show. I thank him for
Thanks,
it.
Elly. You give me an opportunity to stay, in the fight, even though I'm handicapped for, the Constitution, things I believe are the better parts, the better angels of my nature. And you've given me this opportunity. I just want to say thank you, and also to the viewers and listeners. We really have your best interests at heart, whether you're outside the United States or inside the United States. We're teaching the people outside the United States the absolute maximum we can without endangering the inside of the United States. And we're teaching the United States how to preserve itself. Now, none of the information we have is new or novel, right? But we have found ourselves in a place where we're able to have some impact. And we would like you to help us extend that impact so that we can all benefit on a greater level.
Yeah. So, okay, William, I'm going to throw our new ending in, and everyone could see me tomorrow with investigator news and world news, as well as the weather and lifestyle news. Thank you, William, and we thank everyone, and throw in your comments and share, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Elly.
All right. Bye-bye.